And then, like you said, it doesn't get too highbrow. When we get to that level, we kind of go to my channel because I can bring in more of a select group of people that may know the topic, and we can kind of get in more in depth, right? And that's the ones I like because that's the ones I learn, you know?
Right.
And I wish more people would get more in depth in my channel because I'm like, hey, you know what? I want to learn this stuff. Go ahead, man. Get in depth. And if I got questions, I'll ask, which I always do.
Well, right. Well, that's why I originally, when I had Circe on, I said I wanted you and Circe to come on at one point and talk about, go in depth into either epistemology or morality. And it's still an open invitation. So if you guys want to do that, let me
Yeah,
know.
the morality topic though is rough because a lot of people use these words differently, right? And even I do not have a firm grasp on the whole moral content discussion. It's rough. It's not an easy discussion, and I think it goes awry really
Actually,
quickly.
that's why I wanted you personally. That's why I called when I had Circe on the show, because I thought there was a brief period where you guys were with Stephanie, and there was a period of about 40 minutes to a half an hour where I thought it actually started to get productive. I know exactly what you're talking about because you can get bogged down in even what subjective means versus objective, and
Yes.
how people hear subjective can get really, really confusing. But I thought that your take on morality, and I don't know if we should go into this now, but I thought your take on morality could get very productive because I got what you were saying, and I thought we could you meet it. So it's. Or we
I
can talk
appreciate
about
that.
it now.
I try to break it down where people can actually understand it. Although I get things wrong quite frequently, right? But the difference is when people of a caliber that know the material correct me, I don't pull this. Oh, I'm going to push back. I'm going to be like, well, what the hell I got wrong? Even if I was right, at least I'm going to take pause and go, okay, what did I get wrong here? I want to think this through. Like the is-ought, I still have a hard problem with Hume's is-ought. It's a difficult concept to get. I'm still working through it, right? So that discussion I kind of backed away from because I didn't know enough about it to really dive into what the is-ought is more than it just being a hidden premise that exists in there and dealing with normative qualities and other qualities. It's a very difficult subject that I'm not going to ever get good at. So those things I steer away from. The only time I'll get into a discussion with a PhD where I really don't think they're correct, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be an area that they're not an expert in, right? And that happens more than I could probably say sometimes. But at least then when they say, you know what, that's not really my area, I'll go look it up and they'll come back, hey, you know what, on that particular issue, you were right. So it can happen, you know.
Right. Now, the thing that I was going to tell you, because you just made the first time I was on, I liked about Heather, was that was the first time that I, as a theist, ever felt like I was talking to people interested in getting at the truth or having a real conversation, or you guys were not just trying to like shut me down and like shut me out. You were taking some of the things I say to try and expand the conversation. Mm-hmm. So I was impressed the first time I was on the show, and I thought you guys were pretty much fair as far as evil atheists go. I thought you were you're not even an atheist, but
yeah, and I'll get into that
some
a
of
little
the
more
lesser of evils.
And I appreciate that. Look, our goal on the Non-Sequitur show is not to play this game of gotcha, right? We'll be very fair until somebody we think is getting to the point where we believe they're being dishonest, right? And Aaron gets to that point pretty quick. He'll like call somebody out. Right. Look, you're at the point where you're not even listening. You're dishonest, and he has every right to, and I think he's right. You know, at that point, what are you going to do? We do the same thing, but initially, we'll give people the benefit of the doubt, and we want to hear the conversation. If you're an honest person who honestly has a belief, then I'm all for that. Let's talk about it, right? Nobody in the last 5 years. Well, I've had my channel 5 years, but I've only really been doing videos for like 2.5. But I was commenting on other videos for 5 years. But nobody's ever heard me ever bash somebody because of their actual belief, right? I've never mocked Christianity. I've never mocked somebody's fundamental religious ideological beliefs. What I mock is things like flat earth. What I mock is when people say the earth is 7,000 years old and then they give the most stupidest reasons for it, contrary to science. That's the stuff I mock because that's science. They're offering that as a scientific thing. They're not offering it as a faith base. They're not saying Jesus rose from the dead. Okay, fine. That's a faith thing. Out of my area. You know, I'll let the theologians deal with that, right? But if you tell me that the earth reigned for, 7,000 or 7 days for 40 days, whatever the hell it was, and all the animals that exist, and all the plants that exist, and all the extant life that exists came from a ship that was floating all that time. That's no longer a religious belief to me. That is a legit attempt to try to make a scientific claim that I call bullshit on. Right? Do you see the difference?
Okay, what's happening there, though? See, the difference is, and this is kind of, I guess, why there's two things I want to say before I go into this. First thing is, a lot of people will say, yes, I try to be fair, and yes, we try to have real conversations, but you guys actually kind of follow through on it, as far as I was concerned, from my experience. You can hear me, right?
Yeah, from your experience,
Okay, because the last time I was doing this. The other thing, so you guys actually follow through on, is that if someone is making a claim that is more fact-based, then yeah, you gotta be able to back up the claim in terms of fact-based. Like if I were going to present this, I've even said this to the Noah's Ark Christians themselves. If you're going to say like the Earth is 6,000 years old, okay, make your case to these people and convince them of actual concrete reality. All of a sudden you're in an area of conversation.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
You're perfectly legit to challenge at that point. Whatever. If I say, this is America doesn't exist. Just say, I throw that out there. America isn't actually a place. Okay. Prove that with actual evidence that I can latch onto or go away. Right? Is that kind of?
Yeah. Look, if those things are scientific claims, right? If somebody says like Jesus rose from the dead, sure, somebody can say, well, that's still a science claim against the ontology of the universe, saying that
it's not.
we know that the person can't. Yeah, but I take when somebody at least says, look, we're taking it as a faith-based claim that was a miracle. Science has no say on it any longer, right? Again, leave that to the theologians. But when you say that, and I'm not you because I know you're not a young Earth creationist, but when you say that, all life came from the ark, we can test that. And it's not, they're not saying that's a miracle. They're not taking that as a miracle position, right? That's a huge difference, and that's why when I go after young Earth creationism, I'm not going after a person's faith. I'm going after their scientific claims. Because they're saying evolution is wrong.
The substance, if that we're basically, if you're making an outlandish, substantive, empirical claim that belies common sense and basic understanding of reality. For example, America is not a real place; it's an imaginary land. Then you have to back it up with concrete reality, evidence, empirical evidence. But when one of the things that you guys understood innately, which I've had to try to explain to other atheists, when you are having a theological discussion, that's a totally different thing.
Yes.
Then you, agnostic or the non-believer, can enter into discussion as if God really exists. You don't have to believe that God exists in order to discuss his attributes or discuss if I say God is good, a theological conversation without you can just for the purpose of the conversation, agree that, to have the conversation as if God is real. You guys understood that. A lot of atheists won't do that. They'll keep trying to beat you, quote unquote, in the conversation and kind of try to beat you over the head. So there's no point in really discussing anything. You know what I'm saying? Like if we start talking about some of the things we talked about on your show were like theological questions in nature. Is God innately good or does the questions?
Yeah, no, and
so
here's the thing. I can step into any position. If somebody wants to argue a theistic position, I can hear them out. I can step into that position too. I can argue things like argument from contingency or argument from motion or any Aquinas five-way stuff. Doesn't mean I think they're convincing arguments, right? But I also know enough to say, well, you know what? This is why they're not convincing. Explain why the argument of contingency is nothing that gets you to God. At the very most, some of the stuff can get you a deist. Best case scenario. but it doesn't get your theism. And I know that Aquinas doesn't even think that it could either. I think he was using them all as, hey, look, I got all these other things I'm going to throw at you, and make a probabilistic argument that because of all these different things, there's a theist, or a theistic type God. But I don't know for sure of that. But that seems to be what his approach was.
One of the things that I talked about on my channel, and I'm going to go into this more, is that, and I'm sure you'd agree with this, the most of your Thomas, and if Heather or maybe Sai, I don't know if Sai is on board, Stephanie might think they're all good. I don't actually think that the cosmological arguments and the quote-unquote proofs for gods, I don't think they're sound. I agree with, I'll call you an atheist, you the atheist in those. They're not actual proofs of God.
No, they're not supposed to be, though.
One I've heard.
I think it's a misnomer when people refer to them as proofs. They generally are. They're generally referred to as, proofs, right? But they're really not. I mean, they're just...
They don't, because they're not successful.
Right.
Because they don't actually work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The best one I've heard of them is the argument from Eternal Truth. And it's kind of a variation on the Thomas Aquinas one. It's in Fazer's 5 Proofs of God. It's, I think, the 4th one. It's decent. Again, it's not a proof. That's the problem, is he calls the book 5 Proofs of God. It's not a proof. If I can tell you the argument, you're not going to walk away from me telling you the argument going, wow, Craig just proved God is real. It's not,
that's why I don't like the
proof. You know what I mean? It means it's been somebody based on. Go ahead.
Yeah, when people call them the 5 proofs rather than the 5 ways, I just kind of take it back on that, because they're not, like you said, they're not proofs. And I think if Aquinas knew what we know now, he would actually think a lot of the arguments are bad. For example, like the argument from causation, right? That seemed legit to him at the time, and it probably have been convincing to him and other people at the time. But the argument from causation now isn't something that is unexplainable. Matter of fact, we know there are things that do not have a cause. There are effects without a cause. The law of cause and effect is not a real law. There's no such law in physics called the law of cause and effect. Okay, matter of fact, it is a necessity in some aspects of physics and quantum mechanics that there is an effect without a cause, because there's no cause to be had in order to have the effect.
Sai, is he right? Is Sai reading it?
Yeah, I'm right on that.
Sai, he's right. Sai, he's right. Sai, leave him alone.
He's a biochemist. What the fuck does he know about?
He knows. He
physics.
Sai,
I'm kidding.
Sai runs circles around those jerks.
Sai's freaking brilliant, man.
Sai was kicking everyone.
I don't know if he's familiar with this particular thing. I mean, this has to do with the Copenhagen interpretation, because the Copenhagen interpretation says there's no local variables in the system that can describe such that you're going to describe all the states of the system. It doesn't satisfy the Bell inequality, right? But there is something called pilot wave theory, which allows for global variables that will work, but it's a lot more assumptions. It does work, but it's not a local variable model. And if you don't have a local hidden variable model, then that means that inside that system, there is nothing in that system to tell you when a certain event's going to happen, like spontaneous fission or weak nuclear decay. There is no information in that system. It does not exist. There's no causality. That's a fundamental thing of physics in that model, right? That model could be wrong. You could, again, try to use Bohmian mechanics or something, but under the Copenhagen interpretation, you have
what you're basically saying. What undermines, so what you just said in brief undermines the whole premise of cause and effect, which, as far as my layman understanding is that is the root of the scientific method. So you just taught me something that I did not know.
Sygard said, "Yep, stop it. I already said you're right, Steve. I agree with Copenhagen. Yes, I'm smart. I mean, he's God, it's just so intimidating.
Sai knows the deal. Okay, so getting back to that, you were relating that to, just to tie this back to what we were talking about, you were relating that to which one? One of the Thomist arguments for the existence of God, and the first premise being there's no such thing as an uncaused cause, right?
Yeah, because that whole thing is for like a prime mover, right?
That's what you were relating this.
But that's more the argument of motion, right? The argument of motion basically is saying that because we have things in motion.
That's exactly right. one premise. That's exactly what.
Yeah.
Right, but the thing I was going to tell you, I take the atheist side on that argument, is an assertion.